Oh,
All set? All right, perfect. You ready?
yeah.
Awesome. So if we could just start with, if you could tell us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about your childhood.
Well, my name is Peter Fingar. I was born in Germantown. Right now I live in Claremont, but I did live 80-some years of my life in Germantown. I'm about 3 doors from this hotel. Went to school in Germantown until the 8th grade, then I went to the Albany Academy in Albany, New York. From there I went to college in Long Island, State University of Farmingdale, and came back with my dad, who had an insurance business. I went in partnership with him and ran that for, I believe, 40 years, and then turned it over to my sons, who run it now.
Can you tell us what it was like to grow up in this town? If, what an average day was for you?
Well, we lived about a mile from where we're sitting right now. This was the focal point of the community, and it was always a bicycle. That was our transportation, because there was a war on, and Dad was not going to buy gasoline to run kids around town. That was a good idea, I thought. Now I think it was a good idea. And just down the road here a little bit, there was a pond. We did our ice skating in winter time, played hockey. Kind of had to do our own thing. There wasn't much entertainment provided for anyone. There was a musical hall, what is now Otto's hardware store, and they had minstrels weekends only, and live plays. And I think in later years, I recall they had movies too, only on Saturday night, once a week. Let's see, I guess the kids say today we just hang around with each other, and we played a lot of kick the can, I remember that. And then I was on the baseball team. Germantown had quite a baseball team. No, we did not have football, I know that. So baseball was a sport, hockey in the wintertime. In the summertime, we had to work on the farm. That was the system. There were no camps to go to. It was pick cherries or grapes or whatever the crop might be. So it wasn't a very exciting life as I look back now, but it was a good life. Never got in trouble, other than what kids might do, but and that's about it, I guess.
Can you tell us what it was like to work on the farms?
Well, most of it was picking the fruit. I remember in my later years, when I was a little older, I was allowed to drive the horses and put the pears, cherries, or whatever the crop might have been onto the wagon, and they're driving into the packing house where we would pack the fruit. It was up on 9G. We had a farm that I thought was huge in those days. It was about 100 acres. Nowadays, you can hardly turn your wagons around on 100 acres. My dad and his 2 brothers made a living off those farms. And that was the days when the men wore raincoats and sprayed with lead and nicotine. Why they weren't killed, I'll never know. But no one knew they were poisonous, other than to insects. And let's see. Another big thrill was when the wagons were filled up and the crop had to be refrigerated. Then they got in a truck and we went down to the railroad station in Germantown. There were 2 cold storages, and we'd unload the trucks and or wagons, whatever the case might have been, into these coolers that they were by the railroad tracks. And then as the season progressed, they were shipped to, I guess, to New York City. At least they went south. I have to assume that was where they went. And I would work in the cold storage after school afternoons to pack the product up so we could ship them out. That's how we made our money. Of course, nowadays they do mowing lawns around here. But my dad was not going to spend money to have his lawn mowed. Not when he had me. And let's see. I guess that was the excitement of our life, and it was a pretty simple little community. Oh, another thing we did a lot of was sleigh ride. That was a big sport, because we had quite a hill going down to the river, and they didn't have any snow plows in those days to speak of, so there were no sanders, so we could sleigh ride till it came out of your backside. So.
Is there any, are there any stories that stick out in your mind or experiences down in the cold storage and the ice house? Anything that kind of was a unique experience for you?
Hey, Nick, I can't think of any. I'm sure after this interview I will.
That's the way it goes.
But I know we were a little cliques. We couldn't go too far from home. Maybe there were 10 or 15 of us in this little circle of friends. And we did everything together: sleigh ride, ice skate, bicycle trips, never too far, down to the swimming hole, which was on the Roll of Jansen. I live on the Roll of Jansen now. It's great swimming. Of course, nowadays everyone seems to have a pool, so the kids don't swim like they did in my day when we didn't have any pools.
What about the, you had mentioned the art house and later on there was the music house and stuff like that. What was the feeling like there? Is there any, do you have a memory of a specific time you went that really kind of stuck with you?
No, to what?
Right where the variety store is, I think.
Oh, the hardware store.
Yeah.
Well, that was the entertainment for plays, and they used to have minstrels where the men would dress up and look like black men and then tell jokes on everyone else in the town who did what, and all the gossip came out. Of course, that was pretty much outlawed in later years. The minstrel shows, they're not, I don't think they're permitted anymore. Mm. But I remember the men all painted their faces, and big lips, red lips, and they packed that place because that was the entertainment for the community. And they also had carnivals. The piece of land from between here and the post office is a flat area up there, and they played bingo, pitch pennies to the little squares on the box, and that was a big thrill in our lives to go to the carnival every year.
Would the carnival come from out of town and set up there?
Yeah, it was all local. Wow. Like the Legion would put up the bingo, because that was the big money maker. And as I said, they had pitch pennies. Throw the baseball at the cat. There was a dead cat. I mean, a stuffed cat. It wasn't a live one. And just eat ice cream, hot dogs. It was really a high point of the summer to have the carnival. And then I remember at the last carnival was raided by the state police because they decided bingo was a gambling device and it was outlawed. So here all these folks, pretty good honest people in Germantown, all got arrested for running a gaming casino. So that ended with bingo, carnivals, it all came to a complete stop.
Wow. What was it like to go to school in Germantown? What was your schooling like there?
Well, I don't know what to compare it to. Small classes. Had a principal, Mr. Ostrander. I don't think it was very unique. It wasn't the end of my formal education. I went as far as 9th grade, and my mom and dad thought I could do better. I hope I did, I don't know that. So I went to school in Albany, lived up there, came home weekends, rented a room from a professor. I don't think at that time Germantown had any languages, so we got a touch of language, and math only went maybe 2 years. It was very limited. It was not a big school. So that's where I got my high school education in Albany. Graduated from there after 3 years, and then went on. Then I came back to Germantown after graduation. worked for my dad in the insurance business, which eventually, as I mentioned earlier, I took it over. Then he died, and I ran it for some number of years, and now my two sons run it, and I sit back and get interviewed people like you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your parents?
Well, my mother lived down the hill road here, maybe a half a mile. Her dad had a water well drilling business. They were quite popular. Well, everyone has to have a well in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So she was one of 5 girls, and how well they prospered, I guess, is something you'd have to judge by the house. They had one of the finer homes in town. And then my dad, he lived on a farm, and he only went as far as 8th grade because there was no high school in Germantown. When you got to 8th grade, that was it. Now, my mother, being her family is a little more affluent, her father was able to afford to put her on the train every morning, go from Germantown to Hudson. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, go from Hudson back to Germantown, because it was only a dirt road to Hudson. And all these kids would get on the train. And you had to from 9th grade on, or you didn't have any education. So most of the boys went back to the farm, and that was it, 8th grade education, and no more. Mm-hmm.
Now, when did your father start the insurance company?
1930.
Were you in town at the time, or were you at...
I was 1 year old.
You're 1 year
So I
old.
don't remember it very well.
But do you have any memories coming up and that involved your father with the insurance agency when you were younger? Or...
Yeah, I remember it well. He had to work so much at night. Of course, all of his clients were working people. 5 o'clock at night came, Dad would start work. He'd line up his prospects and then go out and see him at night. It was pretty tough, but it was that or go hungry, I guess. There was nothing else. Farming was it around here. If you didn't live on a farm, you had to be a salesman. You had to get out of town, almost like it is now. There's very, very little to offer a young man here. I think we're fortunate with the insurance business, but most of the boys who graduate and girls who graduate from the school here leave. You're a case in point.
What was the town like around like the Vietnam War? How did the town react or shift when that started?
Well, they weren't very receptive to it. Myself, I was in the National Guard at the time, and we were put on call to go, but we never got called, so we were standby. But as you probably know, it was not a very popular war, nor was not too many wars are popular. So I didn't have to serve, and I missed World War II. I was too young. But, most of the young men in those days went to war, and a lot of them never came back too. It's a one-way trip. But we paid our dues, and those who were called went. I guess that's about all I can tell you about the war. Yeah, I do remember one. Because I was too young for the war, we had aircraft watchers. And I was a Boy Scout then. And our job, we had to take, I think, 4-hour shifts around the clock and spot airplanes going overhead. And whenever we saw an airplane, we'd have to identify it like one engine or 2 engines. Then we had to call a dispatcher in Albany and report to him that a 1-engine plane just went overhead north by northwest or whatever we clocked it at. And then they ran grids on all these planes, thinking the Germans were going to come over here. I really don't know how we thought that they could come over from Germany in a 1-engine plane. But all the Boy Scouts participated in that. It was around the clock, 7 days a week. That's how we showed our patriotism, volunteer work.
Where would you spot them from?
You know where the American Legion is in Germantown?
Yeah.
Down on Woods Road?
Yeah.
That was the main watchtower right there. So we'd stand out, as soon as we hear an airplane, out with the binoculars, trying to figure out what it was, and then call it in to our dispatcher. And as I said, they would plot them, and I suppose the next town, they would pick up the plane that we had just disposed of. As I say, I don't know how we thought the Germans would come over here in airplanes, but we did.
Along the same vein, do you remember where you were when the JFK assassination occurred?
When what, Nick?
The JFK assassination occurred?
Oh. Yeah, I was in a diner in Hudson having lunch. I remember that. The place just went silent. No one could believe that someone would shoot our president. Yeah, that was a tragic day. Yeah. I don't remember any mourning like in the churches here or anything, but I well remember it. It's such a shocker. Yeah.
As you got older and began to take over the business, what changed for you when gaining that responsibility and in regards to the town?
Well, when I went in it, there were very few automobiles, maybe one car in a family. Nowadays, every kid in the household has a car. So that was our big market, selling automobile insurance. It was very competitive. In this little town, we had 4 insurance brokers. And now we're the only one left, and I sometimes wonder why we're here. America moved on, and everything changed. We have 2 banks now. The one bank we did have went bankrupt. The head teller decided he should keep the money. But that's another day and another story. But he went to jail too.
Yeah.
And the bank was right next door here, next to what was Otto's hardware store. The telephone company is in there now.
We're currently in the Central House, which was a big, I guess it was the center of action for a long time in the town. Do you have any stories about the building that we're currently in?
This building here?
Yeah.
Well, when I was a young man, this was the headquarters for the Lions Club. The men met here twice a month for dinner, had a guest speaker. And I guess that was the entertainment for the community. There wasn't much. There was always the bar, and they had a separate door to get in, because some of these men were pretty crude, pretty rough. And as I say, there were spittoons, and noisy, oh, it was so loud. I remember Mrs. Eckert, she owned this hotel at that time. She would go into the bar all the time, tell the men they had to be quiet, because we were having a meeting, and we had a guest speaker. Sometimes the language got rather abrasive also. Maybe that was entertainment too. And this was a hotel. It had to be very small because Mr. and Mrs. Eckert with 2 daughters lived upstairs, and there's only 6 rooms now. So maybe they had 2 rooms to rent out. And a bar, and she had a little kitchen in the back here. This, where we're sitting now, is the greeting room. People would sit around and do whatever you do in a little country town. There was a dirt road out front, no sidewalks, and the stables were around the back of the building. Any church or any building like this had a stables for the horses overnight. They were all well churched too. We had three Protestant churches. The Catholic Church didn't come along until about 1930, as I understand it, because the town was founded by German Protestants, so that was actually the religion, and they splintered off. There's a Lutheran conflict down the road, and this Dutch Reformed here, then Methodist about 2 miles up the road. So if you were born 2 miles up the road, you were a Methodist. And if you were born 5 miles down the road, you were a Lutheran.
So then the religious, I guess, mapping kind of all depended on where you were located.
Yeah, where you were born, yeah. was goodness, there was no way to get to church if it was more than half a mile. From here for the Viewmont Church, I'd say it's 5 or 6 miles. And that's quite a ride with a horse and wagon. And then you gotta come back again, a dirt road in the wintertime. So naturally, where you lived is where you prayed, where your preacher was. And I was too young for it, but my mom and dad told me on Sunday the churches were packed. And I guess why it was is there's nothing else to do. There's no radio, no electricity, no telephone.
So you have a unique look, because your business is right in the middle of town. Mm-hmm. How over the years have you seen the village change from when you first started here on the corner to present day? What's been the biggest change for you?
Well, we often say that when we first started out, we knew everyone in the community, everyone. Now, we don't know anyone. It's a complete circle. They come up Friday night from the city, they go into Otto's and have their coffee, read the New York Times, go back to their homes. They don't mingle with the community at all. And that's the way they want it. They got up here for their privacy. And we respect it. They're good citizens, they pay their taxes, they don't send anyone to school, because school is back in the city. And we've come to accept it.
What do you wish their role would be in the community? If you wish they had one at all, would you want them to be more involved, or do you think kind of where it is right now is?
Well, yes, I would like to see them more involved, but the problem is they're only up here Friday and Saturday and maybe Sunday afternoon. Then they're out of town to go to work in the city, so they can't really get involved with us. And when we don't want to work on weekends, we want to work during the week. So just a different mix. So as I say, they'll go into Otto's for coffee in the morning. You won't know a single soul in there. And they're as nice as can be. I love them all. Unfortunately, we don't do much business with them because they don't know about us. They have their business acquaintances in the city, and that's where they stay, connected to the city. So we see them drive by, that's about all.
What about physically? How has the middle of town changed over the years? Is it more? Is there more excitement now, or was there a time in our history when the middle of town was really kind of the place to be?
I don't think so. Yeah, that's a tough one. I remember, just from my personal experience, my mom and dad on the weekends would go visit relatives in the community. And invariably it would be a Sunday dinner at one of their houses. And we kids would play with their kids. And then late in the afternoon, everyone would go home. There was a gathering of the older people, the parents, and the kids mingling together. Remember, in those days, Germantown had one-room schools. So you really didn't have a very large population to choose from. Your friends were your parents' friends. I think that's a pretty accurate description, too. I can remember when we'd get antsy. Come on, Mom, let's go home. Let's go home. And we'll go home when we're ready.
Right.
But visiting was a great, I don't think it was a sport, but it's what we did, or what they did, was visit. There really was nothing else. I remember people telling me they didn't even have toilets in their houses. Outside privies like that. Burned wood. I mean, it's a pretty primitive town.
Right.
And I had a man tell me once he remembered when electricity came to the house. And we get so used to that, we just throw a switch, but that was a big deal to have electricity in your house. Yeah. So we've come a long ways. We're catching up with them.
Were there any kind of standout characters from the town that you remember? I guess anyone that you would see and say, oh, well, that's the old so-and-so being the way that they are, if there were any kind
I
of...
was quite friendly with Gene Saracen, the golfer. He hasn't been dead too many years. I'd say he's been dead 20 years now, but he had a large farm about 5 miles from, 3 to 5 miles from here, raised apples and pears. He was a gentleman farmer. He never got his hands dirty, but he was quite a golfer, though.
Yeah, he, didn't he, wasn't there something, he has a kind of a claim to fame. Wasn't there a claim,
Yeah, he got a hole in one to win the Masters, I believe it was.
Yeah.
He was down several strokes, and I guess he said to someone, I've got to get this ball in the hole to win. And he swung and he got the ball in the hole and won. But he had a lovely farm here in town.
Yeah.
I got to know Mr. Saracen quite well. After he retired, he moved to Florida. And as a matter of fact, I see his daughter once a year. She comes up to visit, but he must have had to pay for the gasoline. But we did have a taxi. I can't think of ever going to Hudson in it. That's the closest community, 10 miles. I remember once my brother and I were in Hudson to a movie. That was a big deal to go to the movies in Hudson, and couldn't get home. So we called my father, and he said, well, then walk. So we had to walk 10 miles in the middle of the night and, to get home. I mean, he wasn't going to come to Hudson and pick us up. We bummed a ride to get there, and he figured we'd bum a ride to get home.
Sarah, do you have anything?
Yeah, you mentioned the taxi. Are there any other unique businesses that used to be in town? When we were speaking outside, you mentioned the ice house.
We
Are
had the
there-
Iceman.
Yeah, if you could describe that.
Well, I don't remember his retail business. He was my great uncle. I remember that because I have to remember it well because I fell into the pond one year, full of ice. Well, what they did, they would dig channels in the pond, and then we'd get on the cakes of ice and float down the channel to put the cakes were maybe 3 feet square and maybe 10 or 12 inches thick. And then we'd float them up to this building where he had an elevator, and then he could lift up the cakes one at a time and put them in the building. And I have to think that he did have a retail business. Well, he did have a retail business to the extent that he would deliver house to house. But he didn't have a store, so to speak. You know, I'll have a bag of ice. That didn't exist. But I remember the horse and wagon delivering ice, because they had ice boxes in those days. No refrigeration. Well, yeah, a little refrigeration. And I remember my mother, she always had to go every morning, go down the road a half a mile to get milk. And she got it in a metal bucket. And it was good and fresh because the cows had just been milked. And the ice box was the only way to keep it cool. But that was Mom's job, get the milk. And ironically, the building still exists where that happened.
What building is it?
It's down back of the Extra Mart gasoline station.
Okay.
If you walk in the back, you can see a barn down in there.
Okay.
And my mother lived up by the high school, and she had to walk down with this galvanized pail and get the milk for the family. And then we had the egg man come, butter and eggs. He came, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week. And then we had the ice cream man, like a good humor man.
Everyone came to you.
Yeah.
Could you tell the story of the time that you fell into the pond or in the ice, off the ice block? Is there a story to that, or is it just...
No, that was me who fell in.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I would say we were horsing around, as kids do, trying to jump from one check of ice to the next. And I slipped and fell in. And my uncle who ran the business, he came out and got me and took me up to his house. And I don't know if we had to go, but my mom and dad always had us go to what they call Christian Endeavor every Sunday night. All the kids in this community right around here went to the Dutch Reformed Church for prayer and play. We went for the play, and the parents went for the pray. But the kids in this area, there were two schools within 100 yards of where I sit. One down the road here, that was a public school. Then one behind you, maybe 5 houses down, was a private school. So Germantown had two schools within you'd almost throw a stone between the two schools. And up in where the Methodists there were two schools up there. Remember, you only had one teacher for all the grades. And then down in Viewmont, that's where the Lutherans all hung their hat. They had a school down there, and all those kids went to that school, and they were all Lutherans.
What was the transition like when the high school was built?
Well, that became mandatory, I believe. They just shut those schools down. Well, they couldn't compete anyway. One teacher with 8 grades. I think that was in 1822, as I recall people telling me. And they got buses, and then they bused the kids to school. But it was an immediate shutdown of the little one-room schools. And if you think back, it really had to be. You couldn't have both situations. But most of those old schoolhouses are still in existence around here. They've been remodeled by our friends from the city who had the money to do it. And now they have lovely small homes, but oh, there's some beauties there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we end each interview with the same 4 questions. We kind of touched on one of them, but I'll ask it again, and then we'll kind of go through for the last 4. So the first one is, for you, what has changed the most in Germantown? What's the biggest difference that's for you over the years?
Wow. What's changed the most for me? I would say that the people. When I was a kid, everyone was a local resident. Now it's just the other way around. Most of the people here are weekenders, and the local residents had to leave the community. They couldn't make a living here, and that still holds true. Otto, our local grocery store, he's an import. Martin here, he's an import. This was a grocery store across the street. Now it's a vacant restaurant. So it's the people that live in the community. Most kids, when they graduate from school in Germantown, get out of town. They have to. You did.
I did.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what has stayed the same for you? What's the constant? What do you feel you can rely on Germantown for?
For me, I'd say it's my lifelong friends. It's been quite a bond for me. I still associate with them. Just lifelong friends.
What does Germantown mean to you? What does it represent for you?
A lovely little community to raise your children. As far as I know, I can say we're pretty much crime-free. You can leave your door unlocked, although we don't recommend it. It's just a quiet little country town. Nothing great happens here. People are friendly, congenial. Yeah, that's what it means to me. It's just a lovely little community to live in. It's not busy. There's no traffic in the morning other than the school bus going by. It's Dullsville, and that's what I like.
If you could pass on any ideals or morals, or what would you hope to give to the next generation of people who either grow up here or settle down here?
Well, I would ask them not to change everything. So many people come into the community that want to change the whole situation, how we live, what we should do, our politics. I like it the way it is, and I think it should be left the way it is. And if you don't like it, I think you should move to the next community where you can change it. I don't favor any change. Other than electricity was all right, and having a public school was okay. But I'm sure there's people who fought that too. But no, I like the community the way it is. We have no industry. And that's why people like the clean air. We have good transportation where we live here. If you want the train, there's one down at Rhinecliff or Hudson. It doesn't stop in Germantown anymore. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, Germantown had 3 train stops. The train stopped at 3 parts of the town. What they call Germantown, and then North Germantown, and Cheviot. And each one of those communities had a church too. Oh, and they also had little general stores. And they were the size of this room. There wasn't much to buy, but you get a little milk and a loaf of bread. But yeah, each one was a little standalone community.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, thank you very much for sitting with us and sharing your history and your
You're very
experiences.
welcome.
We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah will unmic you, and then we'll be all good.